Good evening, everyone. I'd like to reconvene the open session of the school committee. I have 7:06. And if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if we could remain standing for a moment of silence as we consider the work before us this evening. You may be seated. And Mr. Levis, if you could notify the public of the emergency exits, please.
Sure. In the case of emergency, there are two exits to your rear. Either exit out to the foyer, and you can exit the building to your left or to your right.
Thank you. And Mrs. Cologne, if you could honor us with reading the mission statement for Coventry Public Schools, please.
Sure. The Coventry Public Schools, with community partnerships, educate, inspire, and motivate students to be lifelong learners.
Thank you. And just to notify the public, the school committee met in executive session starting at 6 o'clock. We met for about an hour, at which time we talked about contract negotiations and the superintendent's evaluation and homeschool requests. And we also approved our executive session minutes from 1/23/2020. There were 2 votes taken, one for the executive session minutes as well as the homeschool requests, and both of those votes were unanimous and carried 5-0. That being said, is there a vote to seal the minutes of the executive session?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the records of the executive session be kept closed pursuant to sections 42-46-R and 42-46-5.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to approval of our minutes from 1/23/2020, reference number 1. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the open meeting of January 23rd, 2020 as presented/amended.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to number 6, a non-renewal. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion of the superintendent's recommendation to non-renew Jacqueline Rogers, 1 year, .8 social worker for the district, Washington Oak Elementary School, effective June 30th, 2020.
I second the motion.
Any comments from the committee? Anything from the superintendent? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the public agenda. So the following agenda items are open to the public. If the school committee is considering passing something and a motion is made, it goes out to the public before we take the vote. So you can either comment or ask any questions about that particular item on the agenda. That being said, I am happy to announce number 7, which is the celebration of the Allen Shawn Feinstein Middle School wrestling team as the state champs. And I'm going to hand that over to Mr. Levis.
I'm going to ask Coach Souza and Coach Robichard to come up, if you don't mind. So I'm Craig Levis, the superintendent, and I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming. We usually recognize the students first, the student athletes, but I think behind every student athlete, successful program are coaches, and I want to acknowledge both Mr. Souza, Coach Souza, and Coach Robichard for their tonight we're going to celebrate. This is, you guys won the state championship not 1 year in a row, which is, I don't know if that even counts 1 year in a row, 2 years in a row, but 3 years in a row, right? So 3-time state champions, so congratulations. So what I'd like to do is, if we don't mind, we'll call up the individual certificates, and then at the end, when we come up, I'll give you a certificate, but at the end, I'd like to get everybody up here. I'm sure you guys want to say a few things and get a nice photo up here. So, do you want to say a few words before we get started?
I think, I think probably the first thing that Oh, okay.
Live stream.
All right. So I think what we should probably be said first and foremost is, and I know Coach's wife probably feels the same way, that I think we have to thank our wives first for putting up with this. It's in case you don't know about the sport, it takes a lot of time and energy, and they really do a lot for us too. So we have to thank our wives first and foremost. Secondly, I mean, it's yeah. As a coach, and we've been doing this for a long time, and even as we were wrestling, this team that we have here today is full of a bunch of kids that you would hope your kids hung out with, and kids that you hope that your kids grow up to be. And they're leaders, they're friends, they're good students, they're just the kind of kids. This is a team that Coach and I, we talk about this, and we've had a few teams together. This team's going to be tough to see leave the middle school. We're definitely going to miss these guys. It's a big family. It's really, they do it right. And even at the tournament that we had, this was probably my favorite tournament that we won. They came from behind, they worked hard, they did it right. And it was, it's really, Coach and I, it's about the kids. They really had their hearts in it, and they really worked hard. They really dug down, and they didn't quit, and they didn't give up. And it's what every good story is, and it's what every sporting event you hope to be. It's inspiring what they did, and it really is something that you're proud to be a part of, not because of how many matches you win or how many titles you win. It's who they turned out to be, and they turned out to be awesome. And parents, you guys that are here, you guys did awesome. Your kids are great, and we love them.
The school committee, before we introduce our kids, you guys want to make any comments now, and then we'll give you the photo afterwards? Or
I'll take a shot. We're so proud of you. We're so glad you're all here. You make us happy, and we're so glad to be able to celebrate with you and with your parents. Thank you so much for all that you do, bringing them here and standing by and supporting your children. It's greatly appreciated. And to our coaches, administration, everyone, awesome. So that's me. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything.
Hi, my name's Dave Florio. And how you doing? And what I want to emphasize is what you bring to town and what the families bring to town and everyone does. This brings the level and the setting of our town to a much higher level. It makes people want to move here. It makes people want to participate in wrestling. And it just is a nice thing for our community to see this kind of activity. And I appreciate it very much. And I know a lot of people in town appreciate it. And guys, you were great. Thank you so much. And that's it.
Mr. Murray.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I want to say thank you to the coaches. I know it takes a lot of time, an immense amount. I'm a parent of a middle schooler and another one at Western. It takes, it's a lot of effort to be a parent. Never mind go above and beyond to volunteer and do a lot of the extras and really take on the coaching role and be a mentor. So I applaud you for that. I applaud the students working so hard in that role, the extracurriculars. It takes a lot of time and energy from them, because you have to not only practice, but then go home and do all the schoolwork and actually get that done and be a good student. So, but that teaches a lot of discipline that they're going to take through their lives. So I think that's important. And I'm very proud to see our Ochre is taking over the wrestling scene again in Coventry and bringing it home. So having come from that generation of many, many state championships. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Kalunian?
just want to say congratulations. You worked well as a team, and 3 years in a row, you know, that says something. So congratulations to everyone.
Woohoo. And Mr. Pearson.
3 years is a dynasty, right? So we have the new Coventry, Allentown Feinstein Middle School Wrestling Dynasty on hand. Thank you, everyone, coaches, parents, for all your hard work, and congratulations, students and athletes. Job well done. Thank you.
And so one final other note of what you should do is when you come up and receive your certificate from Mr. Levis and from your coaches, if you guys, our students could come and shake our hands, we would really, really feel honored. And then you guys can stay up here kind of until the picture's taken. Okay? Does that sound good?
Yeah, it's all right. So the certificate says 2020 Wrestling State Champions, and it's proudly presented to in your name. And so when you come up, I'm going to give you a certificate. If you can go this way and shake the hands. So Jonathan Reynolds. Do you want to just... Where's Jonathan? Hey, Jonathan, how are you? Congratulations. Love your shirt. Looking sharp. Here you go. Can you look that way? Thanks. Who's next? Josh Lima. Where's Josh? All right. Congratulations, Josh. How you doing? There you go. Good, good, good. Nolan Ventura. All right, Nolan. I love that sweatshirt there. Jacket. All right, thanks. Thank you. Desmond Ray. Where's Desmond? Hey, Desmond, congratulations. Zach Jean Philippe, did I pronounce it right? All right. Hey, Zach, did you move that quickly in the ring? All right. I hope that wasn't offensive. Braden Azadorian. Hey, Braden, congratulations. Charlie Benda. Congratulations, Charlie. Caden Joyce. Thank you, King. Congratulations. Logan Ross. Hey, Logan. Congratulations. Wyatt Cardarelli. Hey, Wyatt. Congratulations. What happened? You broke your finger. Wrestling?
Still wrestled with it. Yep.
Cam Coletta. Oh. What happened, Cam?
It's like broken or something.
Yeah. I had that figured out. Aston Jones. Hey, Aston. Congratulations. Take care. Ronan Cardarelli. Hey, Ronan, congratulations. Dason Jones. Hey, Dason. Excuse me. Andrew Allen. Congratulations, Andrew. Sean Cole. Hey, Sean. Israel Anderson. Congratulations, Israel.
He's much quicker than that, by the way, too.
Is he? Max Laturo. Hey, Max, congratulations. Sebastian Armstrong. There we go. Hey, Sebastian, congratulations. Thank you. Stephen Ross. Congratulations, Stephen. Thank you. Is it Bergehan? Bergehan. Eric Bergehan. I can only imagine you, Eric, in kindergarten trying to spell your last name.
We had a song about it. In order to
Your song, good. Good thinking. I like it. Colby Vital. Is it Vital? Vital. Colby Vital. I apologize, Colby. Congratulations. Cole Sanderson. I like those shoes. Congratulations. Brennan O'Connell. Hey, Brennan. Ariana Seymour. Congratulations. I just want to say Ariana had the strongest grip tonight. Okay, Ariana? And who's this?
Alex Gilbert.
Alex Gilbert. Hey, Alex. All right.
Okay, now, the last one we're gonna give out is for Peyton Ellis. Okay, now Peyton, in the history of the Feinstein Middle School program, no wrestler has ever gone 3 state championships. Okay, not only that, but we did a little research. I don't even think Peyton was scored upon this year.
Nope.
Okay, so he went undefeated, unscored upon, 3-time state champion. Not only that,
The biggest part,
but this year in the state tournament, he beat a returning state champion to win the states. And he beat the state champion that won the weight class up. And he beat the state champion that won the weight class up from that in about 20 seconds. Wow. So this kid you will hear about again. All right? Peyton Ellis. Now, also, one person that we absolutely should thank is that guy right there. Joe, you're the best. Thank you. You want to hold the, who wants to hold the trophies? Who wants to hold the trophies? Scoot over. Hey, little guy. No one's gonna see you.
Alex, I need someone to like. Guys, there's not one.
one.
Three. Wait, am I covering this? Let me get organized. Oh, 3? This is in the top crap. They end on cough.
Hi, everyone. Before I let these young students go home to do their homework and let their parents take them home, my final thought is, wow. And then I also would like, if any parent or anyone in the audience would like to stand up, a student even, to say what they might be feeling right now or wish to thank anyone, please just raise your hand and come to the podium and we'll, okay?
I just have to go up. Not only am I super proud of everybody, their effort, how they grew, and I think Coach said it the best, that if I had a son or daughter, I would love for them to hang around with these kids. They have good hearts. They're just, they do the right thing when nobody's looking, and coaches have really molded these kids to do that, and that's so important. Another thing that I just really want to emphasize on how important middle school sports. And if you don't know this, they don't cut anybody on this team. They take every single person and they do a phenomenal job. And it's just a bonding family. So I truly am going to miss this group too. It is a wonderful group. I'm so proud of you all. And if there's anything ever that I could do, please let me know. Come back. And we do have a special present. It just didn't come in yet. That's you all are gonna like once we get it. Coaches and I spoke, and it's just in the stages of being created. So it's to really honor you all. So we appreciate it, and thanks for another great season.
Anybody else want to make a comment or? Okay, then I guess we can let our students and their parents go, so you don't have to sit through this whole meeting. So you guys can go. Thank you again for coming. It's a pleasure. Very nice, very, just fun. Just fun, yeah.
Well, I have to, can you give me that sheet? Right there, yes. The sheet. I get their name. Yep, okay. Donna, can I give you this? All right. Great. We'll get him. Just if you make him in the morning, we'll get him. I'll get him to the middle school. We'll get him to him.
All right, I think we're gonna continue with our meeting. That's always fun. So moving on to number 8, which is the Renewable Energy Project Virtual Net Metering Discussion and Approval of the Bid, which was our reference number 3. Did you want to start this, Mr.
Sure.
Levis?
Before I get started, I want to thank, first of all, thank Mr. excuse me, Mr. Murray. He was the one that kind of lit a little fire under us to get moving with this. This is something we've talked about, but I want to thank him. And he connected us with Mr. Chris Kearns. Chris is from Office of Energy Resource, and he's helped us. He's also a Coventry resident, which I think is important. He's helped us through this process. I want to thank Mr. Martin and Ms. Mangiarelli because they've done immense amount of work with this process, interviewing financial consultants, interviewing the developers. It's been a lengthy process, and what I want to do is identify Mr. Dan Joyce. Mr. Joyce is, I don't know, you're the president, the owner, the founder of Balance Rock Energy, and he's our financial consultant through this process. He's, you know, I've worked with numerous consultants in my professional and personal career. He's by far one of the most dynamic, concise, responsive individuals that I've ever worked with, and I really appreciate the process. And he's a former wrestler too.
Oh,
So
my
this is
goodness,
perfect
this was
timing.
a perfect night for you.
I told him the other day when he mentioned that to me this morning, I said, I would have thought you were a cross-country runner, but I guess I'm wrong. So anyways, I don't know, Mr. Joyce, if you want to come up to the microphone and kind of walk the committee through the process. But the last thing I want to say is that most times school departments are viewed as consuming tax dollars, and we're the largest employer, and we obviously we're in the people business, and we're an important part of the community. But I think tonight's an important step for us, action for us, because we have an opportunity to make some decisions that are going to save this community numerous millions of dollars over the next 25 years. And in terms of our relationship, and I know Mr. Joyce will talk a little bit about this, there's other ways that we can also put into action some cost-saving measures moving forward and other types of energy. So this has been a great opportunity for us. We appreciate all the people that have been part of this, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Craig. Before I get started, as Craig mentioned, I was a wrestler in grade school and in high school, so this was awesome. I still sort of have goosebumps. I'm so proud of all the kids here. That is great. In the high school, all these guys going through high school, the state better watch out. So thank you for the introduction. It's an honor to work with the school district. It's been a pleasure working with Craig and Sarah and Jason on this project. As a way to provide just a brief overview of Balanced Rock Energy, what we do, our core competency of what we do is helping energy users, large energy users, helping them save money, primarily in the deregulated markets for electricity and natural gas. We work with lots of higher ed clients all around the state and all around the Northeast, lots of big industrial clients, institutional clients as well. Ancillary to our core business is helping clients take advantage of incentive opportunities. They could be efficiency incentives, could be just new programs that were instituted. So that what we're talking about today is kind of a program that falls into that category. So it's just a really great opportunity to implement a program that's going to provide some budget savings. I'm sure you're oftentimes dealing with budget headaches, and this is going to be hopefully something that will help out. So you've probably at some point or another, you've probably heard about community solar or remote net metering. It's probably crossed your path at some point. What I'm going to do is just provide an overview of how the program works, the process that we've gone through to select a developer, the process that we went through to select to make decisions, and then finally our recommendation. So as a way to get started, the opportunity is in reference to off-site solar developments. So if you think about a landowner that owns land but doesn't have, it's dormant land, it could be brownfield, it could be, just land that is not, of use to the landowner. There also might not be any use for the actual power that could be generated from the solar production on site. So in this scenario, a landowner is able to negotiate a lease payment with the solar developer. So farmer, et cetera, landowner, they negotiate a lease payment from a solar developer. The solar developer then builds a solar array, and it begins to generate massive amounts of electricity. Because this is dormant land and there isn't any use for the electricity on site, the program that was instituted by the state of Rhode Island and the legislature, the program allows those kilowatt hours that are generated to flow back to National Grid. National Grid keeps track of the power that's generated. 1 kilowatt hour equals 1 remote net metered credit. So National Grid keeps track of the credits. The developer has the ability to sell those credits at a discount to qualified off-takers. The qualified off-takers in Rhode Island are nonprofits. Cities, towns, colleges, hospitals, housing authorities, et cetera, are the qualified off-takers within the program in Rhode Island. This program is very active in Massachusetts. It's getting off the ground in New York. The rules vary a little bit by state. The Rhode Island program is very lucrative, so it's very favorable for the district. The developer, back to National Grid, keeps track of the credits. The developer can sell those credits to the qualified developer. You can buy those credits at a discount. It can be either at a fixed price or a percentage discount off of the value of the credit. The value of the credit is equivalent to the small business rate for electricity in Rhode Island. National Grid rate C-06 is the small business rate, and that's the value of the credit. So currently the value of the credit is about 17 cents a kilowatt hour, and you can buy those credits at a discount. So what the Coventry Public Schools did as a first step is they sent out, Craig, Sarah, Jason, sent out a request for proposal to all available developers within the state. They received 8 proposals back. They also, Craig and Sarah and Jason also went through an RFP process to select a consultant to help evaluate the process. And that Balanced Rock Energy was awarded that agreement. So as a place to start, we summarized all the results from the first round of bids. We got together with the team, evaluated the results, and then as a next step, because a little bit of time had passed between the RFPs coming in and us getting together, and just from looking at the bids, we felt like there might be some room for improvement on the bids. So we requested a best and final offer from all of the developers for both a fixed price agreement and a percentage discount agreement. We received 6 proposals back on that second round of offers. The 2 top developers were a company called Revit Energy and a company called Nexamp. Revit is an in-state, Nexamp is based out of Massachusetts. We invited both of those developers in to hear presentations and determine which developer we think we want to do business with. The offers, as far as whether we sign a fixed price or a discount type agreement, we felt like both developers were going to be close enough where we could make our decision on who we want to work with first, who's the developer, and then we could, then determine it, and we'd feel comfortable with either price offer at that point. So the savings opportunity is maybe a good piece to go through now. So from an opportunity for savings, we put a spreadsheet together. There's a summary in the document that we prepared, the summary of the opportunity. The rough savings is in the range of $150,000 to $250,000 per year, and we have an estimate of Q1 of 2021 for when this could begin to kick in. The way, again, the current value of the credit is 17 cents. That value rate, that 17 cents, that's the small business rate, that has ranged from 14 to about 19 cents a kilowatt hour over the past 3 to 5 years or so. We're using a conservative estimate up for our projections. We're starting with a value of 15 cents for the value of that credit, even though it's currently at 17 cents. The solar, the earliest estimate is around Q1 of next year, so we're using an estimate of what it may be, at that time. So it's a conservative estimate. The other piece that goes into our estimate is this is a long-term agreement. So what are the rates going to look like over the next 20 to 25 years? We're using a 2% annual increase in the estimate from National Grid, from the value of that credit. So those are also conservative in my experience in the industry. 2% is a fair, probably potentially on the low side of where electric rates will go over the next 25 years. The utility has a lot on their plate dealing with all of this, the new forms of electricity generation that they need to incorporate into their mix and into their kind of, wires and poles and things that are maybe not as modern as some of the new technology that's coming out. So what we did, we evaluated both from a fixed discount standpoint and a percentage discount standpoint, just to give you a feel for how the offer works from an economics and a savings perspective. So if you look at the spreadsheet, you'll see we're using a starting value of 15 cents on the value of the credit, a 2% annual increase, kilowatt hours of 4.3 million. We have a fixed price of 11.45 cents per kilowatt hour. So you could sign a 25-year agreement at a fixed price for the credits. Regardless of the rate of the value of the credits over the term, you're going to be paying that 11.7 for the length of the agreement. The other opportunity is to sign at a discount. The best offer we had for a discount would be a 38.5% discount to the value of the credit, which is like the best discount we've seen. And we've gone through a lot of these agreements. That is a very, very aggressive discount. What we did is we ran both scenarios over 25 years to determine which we thought would be best. It's a close analysis. The fixed price generates less savings to begin with. The discount is more savings to begin with. There's an inflection point at about year 12 where it kind of evens out. And then over the 25 years, based on our projections of a 2% annual increase, over 25 years, the fixed price offer is going to deliver an additional, I think, $360,000 of savings. Again, based on our estimates, we can't, predict with certainty. I wish we could where energy rates would be. But we felt with looking at this, determining, and this was, from Craig's standpoint, we wanted to make the best decision for the life of the agreement, not a somewhat short-sighted decision to take the most savings up front. That's not my decision. That's, that's your decision here. And that was, the recommendation was, let's make the best decision over the life of the agreement. So the feeling was we would go with a fixed price agreement. Now we want to decide on which developer we want to do business with. The two that we brought in, Revit and Nexamp, they were both, we feel strongly that both developers would be able to complete their project, but the proposal from Revit had a number of items that we felt were going to be more favorable for the district. A few of those, one is based on experience. So Revit has to the tune of 6 times more projects from an installed capacity standpoint. So 17 projects and 60 megawatts versus 5 projects and 10. So just from an experience standpoint in the state, we felt like they were able to work within the state, work within, the landscape of regulations and approvals and, just the climate in the state. So we felt good about their ability to get their project over the goal line. To back up a little bit, the reason why I'm talking about getting these projects completed is that you are going to be a key point in this project. You are ultimately going to be financing this project indirectly. What you're going to be doing is signing a long-term agreement if it's approved. You would be signing a long-term agreement to purchase the kilowatt hours that are coming off of this solar project. Once the developer has your signed agreement in hand, they can then go to their bank and provide that agreement to the bank. Coventry Public Schools is agreeing to purchase the power that's generated over 25 years. Now the bank or whoever their financial institution is feels good about their ability to sell this power. So the bank kind of releases the funds, if you will, and now the developer has the money to complete the project. But there are a lot of potential hurdles that could get in the way. There's approvals, there's environmental, there's, neighbors, there's just a lot of potential things that could prevent these projects from being completed. So we felt good about Revity's experience with getting projects over the goal line in Rhode Island. The specific project that Revity is proposing for Coventry is in Johnston. Revity already has solar projects that are active in Johnston. The mayor of Johnston is a supporter of solar. They've done work with Revity. They've been a reference for Revity. So we feel good that from just a political standpoint, they're not going to run into any hurdles there. They do have all of their local permitting in place. There aren't any concerns with neighbors or other other zoning concerns that might prevent this project. So we feel good about that. In addition, Revity has more projects in their pipeline that could make sense for Coventry if this proposed Johnston project hit an insurmountable hurdle. Something could still happen. It could be something totally unknown to us where they could have to, kind of end that project. And then what you would have, because they have a big stable of projects in their pipeline, we've already talked to them about reassigning another project to Coventry if this proposed Johnston project hits a hurdle. The benefit to that is you won't have to deal with going through a new agreement. You can work with the same developer and you'll just be slotted into a new project. There would likely be a delay in the start date, but it would be minimized. So we felt good about that. The final key component as far as selecting Revity that we felt good about is their footprint within the state. Just makes them to be a better developer for us to partner with. What I mean by that is we are going to be allocating your usage to this program. Your usage over the next 25 years is going to fluctuate. We don't know. It's probably going to go up, but it's going to change. We're going to be allocating 80% of your usage to this program. But as things change, you may be in a situation where you want to allocate more kilowatt hours. If your usage increases, allocating more would produce additional savings. If your usage decreases, you might be in a situation where we want to allocate less. And with Revity having a bigger portfolio of clients in state, it's going to be more feasible for them to reallocate within their own portfolio. So that's kind of how we went through making a decision on what type of an agreement and the developer. So again, the decision on the type of an agreement was fixed. The decision on the developer is Revity, the recommendation, I should say. So next we go to risks or concerns. This is an opportunity that I've been in the energy space for about 15 years. This is an opportunity that is really better than any other opportunity I've ever seen. You're not being asked to put up money up front. You're not being asked to use your own roof space or land that you may own. So we're not encumbering any of your land, any of your roofs. We're not asking for any upfront investment. The only thing we're asking for is a long-term agreement to purchase these credits. It's a 25-year agreement. As long as Coventry is purchasing electricity from National Grid, you're going to be able to retire these credits. The only way this program becomes a problem is if you are not using National Grid for electricity to power all of your schools. I don't really think that's feasible, that National Grid would become obsolete in the next 25 years. I do feel strongly that there will be new forms of energy production, that will be introduced in the next 25 years, some that we know about, some that we don't. In my opinion, is that those new technologies, the ones we know or don't know about, are going to be fed through National Grid. So offshore wind, tidal power, utility scale, solar or wind, or massive battery storage. and then things that we're not even on our horizon, on our radar yet. Those are, in my opinion, those are going to be fed through National Grid. I just think it's totally unrealistic for Coventry Public Schools to power all of your buildings with on-site power. But back to my statement about the risks, that's it. You just have to be comfortable that you're going to be buying from National Grid over the term of this agreement. If there was a situation where you weren't buying from National Grid, we would need to find a new home for these credits, or Coventry Public Schools would face a big penalty. The likelihood of us finding a new home for the school for the credits is pretty high, but it's certainly not guaranteed. Many other towns, colleges, housing authorities, school districts throughout the state have already signed on, so you're not first to act here. But I just want to kind of make it clear of how the program works. From an environmental consideration standpoint, the good news, and something that I think you can market to all of your residents, stakeholders, etc., is that Coventry Public Schools is making an investment or a commitment to sustainable forms of energy within the state. You're taking advantage of available incentive programs, which shows your fiscal responsibility. And my opinion would be to use as much of these savings to reinvest in your schools, into sustainability, to reduce usage, to improve efficiencies. And so you're taking that savings and reallocating that to make your schools a kind of safer, cleaner, better environment for the students. In final, the recommendation is a 25-year agreement with Revit. We've shared the draft agreement with legal, and we haven't gotten any feedback yet. But the next step, I assume we'll let Craig take it, but the next step would be to get feedback on the agreement and get to a place where the agreement is approved, signed. At that point, the developer has their agreement in hand. They complete the project. We will be providing you updates on how they're doing and what we expect from a go-live standpoint. At this point, the developer is they're technically using a Q4 of 20 go-live. I put in my summary Q1 of 21. I think it's more realistic. I think Q4 of 20 is maybe a little too eager, but it's going to be in that time frame. We'll provide updates throughout this year. Once the project goes live, you begin to see credits about a month later. You'll be tracking the credits. It'll be a small function internally to just audit the credits that are coming in on your National Grid invoice and the invoice that's being paid to Revit.
Can I just say before the committee asks questions, I know Ms. Mangiarelli wants to say something, but another component to this, and it may not be a big deal to the developers, but I think it's important for us to know, is that Revit also gives a $5,000 scholarship every year, which I think is significant to students. And the other part of this in our decision-making was that we wanted a project that we felt would be up and running, again, as Mr. Joyce said, maybe not the end of 20, but the beginning of 21, because I think that's important for us where we're at in terms of our budget process. And the other thing is the competitor that we were very positive about, but the reality is their project was probably one of the largest projects around, and in terms of when this would be online, was much later, and they hadn't been through all the permitting, and so we felt that this is for Coventry, for us, this would be the best scenario. And I think, again, as Mr. Joyce said, we played around with these numbers that are up there. The 15 cents is very conservative. Yeah. So we know when we put in other numbers, sometimes it got us up to like 11 million. So I think this is just an incredible opportunity. This company that we met, we interviewed everybody. We sat with Revit, and they have a lot of experience in Rhode Island. They've already done most of the permitting. They've worked it out with the neighbors, and we're very conscientious of some of the concerns in Coventry around solar and wind power. And I think this piece of property is the residents in the area, they supported this whole project. So I think there's a lot of considerations or areas that we took into consideration that make this the best, we believe, the best decision. And we've inherited, and as you know, we talk about this ongoing. There are a lot of situations that we've inherited, or we've dealt with, where people had made a decision that might be the best decision, or they felt was the best decision, but it's impacted us down the road. And that's why we look at this and locking in that rate of 11 cents, we felt, is not only good for us now, but moving forward, we can guarantee that unless those couple of scenarios that Mr. Joyce discussed, we can guarantee that these are going to be the savings for this community. And I think that's very, we have not landed in any of these situations in our budgeting. So I think this is a great opportunity. And the last thing I'll say is there still may be opportunity for the town to jump on board with this. And we were very, that was very concerning to us. We want to make sure that if there's an opportunity for the town, because we know they have a brand new police station, Mr. Robelot's here, and a DHS senior center, but it's all electric. So there's opportunities for this project for them to tie into it, and that's a conversation for another day. So anyways, I'll just let Ms. Mandrelli add something then turn to.
Right. So I just,
Sure.
I'm glad you mentioned the educational program, but also Revit was open to additional discussions about what we wanted to see out of the educational program. So they had also mentioned having a TV so that it could be built into the curriculum for monitoring. We obviously have 7 schools.
Yeah.
So when we had pushed back a little bit during the interview, they were open to working with us to develop a more comprehensive educational incentive for this as well. And then the only other component I want to share is that while the projected timeline would have a budgetary impact for next year's budget, I won't be bringing forward a budget impact for next year until we're further in the line. So it would really be like a budget to actual update for next year, because there's so much susceptibility for this to go either completely the wrong way or just get delayed, which it could be more likely that we don't want to build a budget around those savings. But still, in the long run, this is a really good opportunity for us looking out over the 25 years.
I agree with holding off on the budget.
Yeah, you don't know.
We're going to do our best. We feel they're going to complete it, but National Grid is a key component here. Anything could happen that delays this. A 3-month delay could come up just like that. Any questions or?
So thank you for the presentation and to all the hard work from everybody. We'll just go down the line. Mr. Florio, any questions?
No, seems like a concise evaluation that was done by Mr. Levis, Ms. Mangiarelli, and Mr. Martin, and it seems like a good deal for us. So I have no questions, Madam Chair.
Mr. Murray.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. Helps clarify what is a pretty complex process. So before I start, I just want to say, it's, as Mr. Levis said, it's easy to come to them and have an idea, but they really carried this through, and I want to thank the administration for doing that. It's a lot harder to actually take an idea to fruition. It's easier to sit up here and say, we should, because I kind of know this process, but it's a lot harder for the administration to do the day-to-day and actually carry it through. You've hired a really good team, it appears, and has done this analysis. So I'll leave it at that. Chris Kearns is here from OER. Is there any risk that the programs from OER will expire? I know that there's agreements that are duration, is it 20 years for the OER credits? And
so this is a state law. Once you lock in, you're grandfathered in. So whatever they do prospectively down the road, once you're locked in, you're protected.
so is that in perpetuity, or is that, it is? So as long as if you can do your extensions and keep that online, you could prospectively extend this indefinitely. Which is good news. As far as the context of the site that we'd be looking at for this project, you had said it's supported by the community. Is it a redevelopment site? Is a sort of a virgin site that is how large of a solar array? I apologize, I didn't have a chance to get into every aspect of this, but can you give me a little context on it?
So we don't have. The site hasn't been used before, so I would say it's not a brownfield site. It's a site that they had to do some clearing, but it hasn't been used for anything else prior. I don't have specifics about the site, like we haven't toured the site. I think that could be something that we might want to do as we're going through the agreement process.
I mean, I just, just general, as the superintendent mentioned, we're sensitive in the community to other communities, and it sounds like there wasn't pushback on the project. Chris, you were gonna?
I'll let you clarify, but my understanding is it was a commercial industrial zone lot, so it wasn't a residential zone.
So it's an industrial
Yeah.
zone lot, which is positive. We had a lot of controversy around residentials, and I think that's the point. Is we're sensitive to that here.
Yeah.
And I want the public to know that we're being responsible in the selection process, not just sort of plowing in. A lot of these solar farms plow in the communities, and they really,
Yeah.
run
and
rim
that's-
shot, and
Take a
it's
lot of trees down.
created some backlash. So I just want to make sure we're not a party necessarily to that, and there hasn't been any backlash to this individual project. Is
Yep.
that a fair statement? that-
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what Revit has provided to us is that this project is fully approved, and the town is on board. They have their permits in place, and they're all supportive of it.
Can I add just one more? So I know that they'd also done their preliminary reach out to the abutters, and there were some requests that were made by the abutters to the property, and Revit already took it upon themselves to meet those needs. So one was like creating a little beach area and some additional trees to kind of shield the.
So is
the
there
solar
water
fields.
all around the site? Because it said Shore Drive, and it looked like there was water there.
Well, yeah, it
Yeah.
looked like almost like a little peninsula,
Yeah.
right?
It's a
So-
pond in John, okay.
Right,
or a
so
lake
it
or
looks like
whatever.
all the abutters' requests have already been satisfied, which was one of the reasons that we like that. And in addition to the fact that it had already gone through the local permitting,
Yeah.
it sounded like they had already addressed the concerns that were raised, so.
Okay. So all their agreements in place with OER, and all of the transmission has been
Yeah.
approved?
Yeah.
I know getting the power transmission takes a while, so that's also approved.
Yeah, what they provided to us is that, yeah, this project is fully approved, and they're ready to begin.
That's
And
great.
this is a key component for them to begin construction.
I mean, my obvious concern is usually the building of the solar park is actually the fastest process. The
That's
approvals
absolutely right.
can be a couple of years, and so if we're looking
Yeah.
for some short-term savings.
That's right.
This is more for my own, benefit on risk as far as, and this is a long shot, but we are in a resiliency phase here as far as natural disasters, things like that. If this solar field goes offline, how would that affect our agreement?
So you're only going to pay for credits that you receive. So you're not under any responsibility to pay for anything if there are not any credits generated.
Okay.
If there was a natural disaster, the facility would be offline and it wouldn't be generating power, so you wouldn't be able to receive any credits.
Right, so effectively our savings goes away
Your
for that
savings
time
will go away.
period.
From a
And
legal
it-
standpoint, we haven't really drilled into the agreement too much yet. We're just getting started there. But from an agreement standpoint, there likely will be some ability for you to pick up or recoup some of that savings if they were negligent with that project. But if it was a natural disaster, a force majeure type event, they're going to be covered from having to make any payments to the district.
Okay.
But that would be, your loss would be the lost opportunity of savings.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any precedent for that for insurance to cover that gap or something in that time. It comes from some articles I've read lately. I guess in Puerto Rico, they were talking about the issues with the hurricanes and when the panels went offline.
Yeah.
There's a ripple effect. So it's just something as far as the agreement, if there's anything we can do to protect ourselves in that scenario, then, obviously you're the expert. I said we look at, I don't know if there is any industry standard on that.
The only thing that we can kind of bargain for, if you will, with the agreement is how much we may be able to recoup from the developer, but it's not going to be a significant amount of money.
Right.
Because if they're not generating power, there isn't anything to provide to you.
Right.
They would, I would, the developer is going to have their own insurance coverage on this project to protect their investment. And, proceeds, whatever we negotiate, would probably come out of that insurance payment, if there was a natural disaster.
To that point, would there be anything in the trust that would cover that as far as almost like a business gap insurance where you have, it's just a question, maybe it's this question you could pose to the trust. I mean, I don't know.
We can propose it. I think the first step would be to get John's review
Sure.
you know, and identify any areas that he's seen as weakness. And I know he's worked with Charahoe. I know Foster Gloucester is going out there. So I think he's getting more familiar with this process. So we did send him the draft agreement, and I expect him to come back with, you know, comments. But once we have that, I can send it over to the trust and see
Okay.
what our exposure is.
Again, it's it's unlikely, but we do live in an age where things seem to be getting worse and worse. It's not uncanny that something like that would happen. I just would rather build it in now if we can. So it's just, something I'm asking to look into. I recognize this company by its vice president. Was this Southern Sky?
Yes, it is Southern Sky.
Okay,
Yeah.
so is this a DBA or?
It's a new, so I haven't, they've changed their name.
Okay.
I haven't specifically asked questions about why.
Okay.
I just didn't feel like it was, my business to ask. But what I believe happened is it was a split with business partners. But Ralph Palumbo is the CEO and president. That's the same company. That is Southern Sky.
Okay, so they're still managing that same portfolio,
Yeah.
even though they split? Okay.
Yeah.
And along that line, will there be a third party that takes over sort of I know that they've worked with Captonia before on some of their projects where they transfer management responsibilities to them, or I don't know how that works, but.
What they've, mentioned to us is that they're going to own it and manage it
Okay.
over the life of the
So they will okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Once the solar, you probably know, once the solar project is built, it's going to run.
Right.
The management is going to be remote. They're going to be able to track by panel the production, so they'll know when they need to replace a panel. They'll inspect it, on a maybe a monthly or quarterly basis. But the management of it is pretty straightforward.
No, I think it's great. Having, I think, the TV in the school and having even the students engaged and seeing it in production. I have solar in my own house, and I go on my phone and I look at how many trees I saved this month, and they have the converters. It's pretty interesting just from an educational aspect of what we could do with this. So I was encouraged to see that. And I'm sorry to take up so much time, but I just want to make sure I get these questions. And this is more of a budgetary question. So we're obviously looking to save a substantial amount of funding, potentially, which then reduces our overall potential operating side of the ledger. Is there any mechanism or policy we could put in place, let's say for a fund balance, if we were to recapture that, to divert those funds to a capital type account? Or it's difficult because I know we have to budget for what we use, but is there any method of budgeting for what we'd actually use if we used electricity and then diverting that recaptured savings in the capital account or something?
So technically, yes, we could. And if that was something we wanted to look into for next fiscal year, because this could come online without us budgeting for it. However, we're looking at cutting $1.3 million. So it's nice to say any savings we have could go to capital, but knowing that we're cutting $1.3 million on the operating, I think if we have a reduction in our expenditures, hypothetically for 21-22, my guess is that those are going to be realigned to operating expenditures that we're trying to cut or not fund next year. So if we were looking at a great budget scenario for next year, I would say absolutely, let's earmark that money towards capital. I just don't think that we're there yet, but I don't think it's something that we should take off the table. And again, if we come forward with a solid budget for next year and then we incur $230,000 worth of savings in energy for next year, I would be more than happy to assign that. But I think just looking at our overall picture, we have a lot of other operational expenses that we're not going to be funding next year, given our finances.
No, that's fair. I think my larger concern is that we lose these great recaptured savings. We sometimes recapture savings only to take a 0.1% off our tax rate, and then it gets absorbed. Well, I like to save the taxpayers money, which we try to do anyway. We also aren't investing in our schools. We're having to cut. So I'd like to recapture that make sure it gets recaptured for our district. And that's not really kind of falls to you, but it falls to us to figure out how we manage those savings, whether we just kind of say it comes off the line of where our request comes in, or obviously this year we're having to make cuts. If we're in the same situation when this came online, we have to maybe make less cuts. Right.
Right, and
So-
I think that would be how we would present it, is because we have these savings in our utilities, we are able to repurpose that money for expenditures that are going back into the school. You know, and if there was a point that we didn't need that additional savings, then I think that's where we can look to break it into, you know, capital or whatnot, but.
Okay, fair enough. That is all. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Donna?
Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate the fact, I don't know that much about solar energy and how it's, so I appreciate you explaining everything.
Great.
It sounds like a great opportunity. It really does. I think that, you know, it could be a tremendous savings for us. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Pearson?
I don't have any big questions. The information we were provided was very thorough, and I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad to hear, the one thing I really am glad to hear, and I know we've talked about it, is the fact that this site will be in Johnston and everything is, the permits are pulled and everything's approved, the neighbors are happy. Because if you look at some other communities like Hopkinton, West Greenwich, you know, they're struggling with some of those things. So that's very good news and very encouraging. So thank you.
Again, thank you very much. And again, the material that we got was wonderful, even though this is not my expertise, but it's nice to read about it and see that it's something that we can do. And before we let you go, did anybody from the audience have any questions for our experts? No, seeing none. I think are we ready to move
Yes,
on the
Madam
motion?
Chair. Madam Chair, I make a motion to proceed with Revit for a 25-year fixed price agreement.
I second the motion.
Any further questions from us on either side? Comments? Anything from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Woo-hoo. Okay, so I guess we're going to move on to trauma-informed community grant, which is Mr. Robillard.
Mr. Robillard, yeah, I would like, I should say, yes, I would like to, Mr. Robillard, who's been an incredible partner in this whole process of the grant that we received, and, you know, I'd asked him if he would give an update. We haven't updated the committee in a period of time, so I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule and coming tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I did forward a PowerPoint. I'm not going to go through that
Okay.
to save time
All right.
and people's souls. But I do want to present about 10 minutes of your time just
Okay.
on where we are in the grant and kind of the meaning behind it.
Mhm.
So first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity, because one of the things I'm really happy about is that the community is starting to come together on this project. According to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, the primary mission of schools is to support students in educational achievement. To reach this goal, children must feel safe, supported, and ready to learn. Children exposed to violence and trauma may not feel safe and ready to learn. Not only are individual children affected by traumatic experience, but other students, the adults on campus, and the school community at large can be impacted by interacting or working with the child who has experienced trauma. Thus, as schools maintain their critical focus on education and achievement, they must also acknowledge that mental health and wellness are innately connected to a student's success in the classroom and to a thriving school environment. So becoming trauma-informed should be an essential component to the overall mission of the education system. A trauma-informed school recognizes that trauma affects staff, students, families, communities, and systems. Thus, organizational support, partnerships, and capacity building are essential. Some of the essential elements of trauma-informed school systems, I think, is a great thing to start with this evening. First is identifying and assessing traumatic stress. Second is addressing and treating the traumatic stress. Third is teaching trauma education and awareness. Fourth is having partnerships with students and families. And fifth is creating a trauma-informed learning environment, social and emotional skills and wellness, with a focus on building cultural responsiveness. Also integrating emergency management and crisis response, understanding and addressing staff self-care and secondary traumatic stress, evaluating and revising school discipline policies and practice, and collaborating across systems and establishing community partnerships. That's one of the reasons I'm here tonight. We know that trauma is highly prevalent and can impact a person at any space and time during their lifespan, and may present as mental health, substance abuse, or physical health conditions. The Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, purports that individual trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, with lasting adverse effects on an individual's functioning, mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. If you think of the 3 E's, an event, an experience, and an effect. So we received over $440,000 grant from the Rhode Island Foundation through their Behavioral Health Fund to begin what I believe is a 10-year process, even though this grant is only 3 years, to have Coventry become a trauma-informed community. So this 3-year grant will offer trauma-informed training for our Coventry community, inclusive of our schools, including our bus drivers, our bus monitors, our food service workers, all faculty and support staff. It'll also grow to the municipal government, and all departments in town will be trained. Our community at large will also receive training. Families, youth sports leagues, daycare centers, and early intervention programs during the life of this grant and beyond. So now I can give you a report where what we've accomplished thus far. We've contracted with Family Service of Rhode Island's Trauma, Loss, and Victim Service Unit. The clinical director of the program, Kayla David, has been out to meet teams at each of the schools within the district and get to know the uniqueness of each building, their faculty, students, and families. She's a lead trainer and on-site consultant for the project. I believe a strength of this consultation is that there's a presence within the school buildings of a trauma specialist. This specialist can assist in ongoing development of trauma-informed practices and support a trauma-sensitive and compassionate school environment. She also can support all the good work and best practices which are currently happening across the district. Secondly, during the first day of the school assembly, where all of the district employees were present, a brief introduction to the trauma-informed work which will be occurring in our town was presented. This was an initial opportunity to frame and focus our project and give educators and all those who interact with students more tools to lead to student success. And following that, our district administrators have received initial trainings in trauma-informed care. So the administrators in all buildings have had some exposure. Each school within the district has brought forward champions, that means staff at all levels, from each building who have been trained and will serve as a catalyst for bringing this district's trauma-informed message and our mission forward. Having a variety of staff members within each school will strengthen the focus of the grant and engage the district staff and help us maintain momentum. Also, very recently, the Trauma-Informed Resiliency Steering Committee has been formed. That's the driving force of community members that are going to negotiate what trauma-informed care looks like in Coventry and what resilience building through community partnerships will look like. This steering committee is composed of first responders, school resource officers, clinical staff, administrative staff at all levels, elementary, middle, and secondary, early intervention and special education staff, as well as representation from the Town of Coventry Department of Recreation, members of my staff at the Department of Human Services, and executive membership of the Westwood YMCA. This group will expand to parents and other members of our community to move our mission forward and refine how Coventry defines trauma-informed care as it relates directly to Coventry. This will also include a train-the-trainer model as time goes on, so we can build capacity and continue after this 3-year grant cycle concludes So all new staff will be onboarded with the expectation that the district is valuing trauma-informed approaches in all of their work. So at this point, we stand with our next steps ahead of us. We're looking to trauma-informed train the entire district. We're also looking to have a shared language and understanding for our community leaders. So trainings will be forthcoming for both our school committee and our town council to participate in, so that trauma-informed education can happen from top down and from bottom up. The goal is to address and understand, learn and identify trauma in children and adults, and increase healthy outcomes, connections, and maximize resiliency. This belief is congruent with the recommendation from SAMHSA that a focus needs to be on resilience, or the ability of a person, family, organization, or community to cope with and adapt to challenges and setbacks. Whereas, although children may have exposure to trauma, they can learn, grow, and be successful with the right supports, trusted adults, and a responsive community in which they live. So we'll be training, going forward, our bus personnel, our food service workers. To include them in this process is very important. Our bus drivers are the first people that interact with our students in the morning and last in the afternoon. So it's really important that we're all speaking the same language. Our food service workers see children sometimes at their most vulnerable. So we also look to train our clinical and special education staff on assessment of trauma and referral for services, connecting families and children to the services they need. And also training our school staff in vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, with a strong focus on self-care and prevention of burnout. As we do this, we're going to continue to collect data and work towards trauma-informed policy development throughout the town. That means not just school policy, but town policy as well. And that's pretty much where we're at this moment, but I would like to finish with just what the trauma-informed approach focuses on. First is safety. Second is trustworthiness and transparency. Third is peer support. Fourth is collaboration and mutuality. Fifth is empowerment, voice, and choice. And finally, taking into consideration cultural, historical, and gender issues. And that is my report as of where we stand today. But I look forward to coming back and giving you some more updates as we proceed.
Great. Thank you. So I'll start with Mr. Florio. Do you have any questions for Mr. Robillard?
None whatsoever. Mr. Robillard and I worked together on the Juvenile Hearing Board for almost 10 years.
All right. Mr. Murray.
Hi, Mr. Robillard. Thanks for the update. I only had one question. Is there a program evaluation component of this where?
Yes.
You had mentioned data collection.
Yes.
So how do we measure success?
Well, there's multiple ways in which we're going to do that. We're going to look at district data from our bullying prevention all the way straight through. I can if you look at the package that I forwarded to you, it has that information within it.
Okay.
And I can give you some more detail. I just don't have it right in front of me right now.
Oh, that's okay.
But I'm pretty sure that
We have it in the package.
Mr. Levis can
There is
also,
a program evaluation.
There is.
So we actually, part of this grant, and I think one of
We
the,
contracted for that piece.
yeah, we actually budgeted about $10,000 a year. And when we had our rollout, and Dr. Matt Collins from the medical director from Blue Cross Blue Shield, they're very interested in that assessment piece, because if we can provide interventions that lead to healthy outcomes, it's going to impact medical insurance and the wellness of the population. So they're really interested in this. So that was a crucial piece, I think, of what we're doing, is that assessment piece. And we have an organization we're working with that's specializes in trauma, that has assessment. So Mr. Mattson, he's met with our principals, but he'll be going around, and this will be an ongoing process. So that'll be some of the data we can report out.
Yes, absolutely.
Through the process.
No, that's good.
Pre-
And
and
the reason I
post-testing,
ask is
absolutely.
obviously, future funding is typically tied to that. You mentioned this is a 3-year grant.
Absolutely.
So if we can measure success and demonstrate the success, we might be able to extend that grant or, apply for new grants and whatnot. So, and it's honestly, it's good to know if you're successful. Not all programs are successful.
Correct.
You try.
Mhm.
Sometimes you fail, but, at least we're trying. So Sounds like you've done a lot of good groundwork along with the team, and
It's a process. It's hard to kind of condense a 3-year grant into
That's
10
a lot of
minutes. But we definitely are working towards a collaborative approach and community-wide approach, because we believe that that is the best practice. We've actually met with folks from Tarpon Springs, Florida, who have been a trauma-informed community for over 10 years, and they've agreed to be our sibling city and provide any supports and best practices that they've learned through the process too. They're going to be coming into Rhode Island in the next within the next quarter to come and meet with us and review some of the strategies that they've utilized. So.
no, it's great. And the last comment I have is I think it's just a really good effort from a community building standpoint. And the only way you really build community is to communicate with each other. And I think this is an
People in the same
opportunity-
room at the same time.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
have a shared goal. So I think having everyone moving in the same direction towards a shared goal, I think is good. It builds teamwork, it builds community. And if we get nothing more out of this, my hope is we get much more, but that we're a stronger community for it. So thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Donna?
Thank you for the update. I think this is, it's a great program, and I'm looking forward to seeing, what happens in the next few years and how everything comes together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pearson?
Just thank you for the information. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming and sharing this with us, and it's
And I'll be
exciting
I'll
work.
be back with some more
I
information.
know you will. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Before we move on, was there anything from the audience? Any comments? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Levis, did you have something? No? Okay. So I guess we can, again, thank you, Mr. Robelot. We can move on to number 10, which is the discussion and approval of vision of the graduate district mission statement. Yes, you may. Yes.
So I'm just passing out a summary of the mission statement component, and I want to introduce Ms. Kristen Capwell and Ms. Julie Macaron, and these guys have done a phenomenal job. We had a brief meeting this morning, and they've just done a phenomenal job in terms of this whole NEAS process and coming to finality March 1st to 4th. So again, I want to thank you coming back tonight, and I know you guys. Last time you were here, you presented, and I think there was a lot of positive feedback, and you said you were going to go back to the schools and get more input. So I appreciate that, and I know this is a quick turnaround, but you're here tonight to really, they're going to ask the committee to approve their recommendation, and they have some information pertaining to it. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Sure. I think just what we have for you, and I think we had also put it in a handout for you, is just the mission statement, which is really just a reflection of our vision of the graduate, which came about from a district committee with representation pre-K through 12 of each of our elementary schools, representatives from our middle school and our high school that had worked together to decide what do we really want graduates of Coventry Public Schools to know, what do we want them to do. We developed our profile and indicators of that. As we were working on this, we began to think about the mission statement, and we looked at mission statements from the high school, the middle school, and some of the elementary schools. And as we were doing that is when we really started to talk about the mission statement and talk about the unity of all of the schools and how great it would be to have a mission statement for all of us together and have that mission statement really reflect our vision of the graduate. So that's why we had originally brought that mission statement to you.
And after we were here last time, we did send an email out to the district principals to get any feedback that they might have, what they thought about the mission statement. We had another district meeting with the team that was working on it to see if they had any feedback to bring back from their schools. And the responses that we did receive were positive. But we just thought we would go over the mission statement again, and then what it means, what each of those indicators are for our vision of the graduate. Those have been finalized as well. So when we presented our PowerPoint, probably in the fall, we had a draft version of it, and our district team has finalized those indicators under each of the elements of the vision of the graduate for the graduate profile. And those are the indicators that are there in our mission. So,
Yeah, so the mission of Coventry Public Schools is to inspire, support, and challenge all students in an inclusive community to be critical thinkers, effective communicators, reflective learners, responsible individuals, and global citizens. And then, so kind of what does it mean for graduates of Coventry Public Schools? And then we kind of took those, thank you, and kind of broke it down.
we thought about what type of people we want our students to be when they graduate from Coventry Public Schools. And the first element of the graduate profile is that we want them to be critical thinkers. So in that, they will be able to identify problems and explore solutions, analyze outcomes and reflect on results, ask questions and seek new knowledge, and support claims with evidence and reasoning.
Effective communicators, read, write, and speak across multiple disciplines, engage with print and digital media while developing a responsible digital footprint, listen actively and provide feedback and input, and express their ideas and knowledge through the arts.
Reflective learners, sets goals for post-high school opportunities and career, advocates for learning and growth, seeks feedback and revises work, reflects on strengths and weaknesses.
And then a responsible individual who demonstrates their choices that promote physical and emotional well-being, collaborates and compromises with others to own group outcomes, fulfills obligations and responsibilities on time, adheres to school policies and procedures and expectations.
And finally, global citizens. They impact the community responsibly, show empathy, inclusion, and respect for others, understand their civic responsibility, and seek to understand other cultures. Okay? And we've brought in elements of the existing Coventry High School learner expectations and core proficiencies, and then members from the middle school and the elementary schools added some of the work that they have been doing to reflect the language. We wanted to have a common language from pre-K through 12 as we discuss these learner qualities in our students. So tonight we were hoping that our mission statement could be approved as we move forward in our process here.
Well, it's great work. I have one question.
Sure.
I just don't, on the responsible individual, the scales that you have, I got the heart on one side. What's on the other side? Oh,
It's
that's
the
a brain?
brain.
Oh,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure because I wasn't 100% sure. I thought it might be, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, my brain isn't blue, but well, maybe it is. I don't know. But I didn't know what that was. I couldn't tell. It is a brain. Okay. Did everybody know it was a brain? I don't know. Anyway, that was my only question. Mr. Florio, any comments?
No comments, Madam Chair.
Right. Mr. Murray?
I'll just reiterate what I said last time, which is really good work. I'm very supportive. And I think more than anything, the fact that you dug in and really given some thought to this, where no offense to our existing mission statement, it's fine. It rolls off the tongue at the beginning of a school committee meeting. But honestly, from my standpoint, I think this has much more depth and meaning because it's coming from you and the other members of the school district, and that you're going to believe in it and you're going to promote it and you're going to advocate for it. And I think that's more than, as me as a school committee member just sitting up here, I applaud that and that grassroots effort to really get this done and build that culture. So thank you very much.
I think it'll be great too because our kids will be living it. It'll be
Yeah.
something that they're actually doing.
Absolutely. And I think having that uniformity, I'm glad to hear that you did go back because that was one thing that Ms. Patnod asked you to do, and really get sign-on support from the other schools, because I think it's important you're all in one ship rowing together, right? And I think this is another example of how we're coming together as a district, all rowing in the same direction towards common goals. And I think this just brings us closer together on that. So thank you.
Donna?
I'll say the same thing that I said before. I think this is wonderful, although our current statement is okay. It just doesn't have the meat and the substance that you put into this. And the fact that this statement is actually part of the vision of the graduate. This is what we expect from everybody that graduates from Coventry schools. So I just love it. I really do. You did a very, very nice job. you know, I applaud you.
Mr. Pearson? No questions? Again, I love it. I really do love it. I think
And
it.
also, we have a few other members of our committee here, like Cynthia's here.
You
and
guys want
Paul is
to
here.
got it? You want to stand up so we can
Yeah,
say
because
thank you?
they were on our committee as well.
Come
and I
on,
feel bad
everybody.
that yeah. Paula. So
Thank you.
And Don. Sorry, Don.
Oh,
You were with us, so I
Dawn.
couldn't call. Yeah, I didn't want them not to get credit as well.
I think we're ready to move. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the revised district mission statement for the district for Coventry.
I second the motion.
Any further discussion from the committee? Anything from the public? I'm really happy that we're going to be reading this next time, so we're very glad. All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you so much for this hard work. We really love it. Thanks. Okay, I think Mr. Cowett's on next. Ridecast presentation, Mr. Levis, did you want to start this?
No, just, yeah, I want to introduce Donnie, and I know this has been a lengthy meeting. Mr. Cowart. What did I say? No, Don. I said Don.
Did I miss something?
I don't think it's time for public comment, Ms. Norbelucci, so. No, I just say, Mr. Coward, and there are many people here tonight to assist in this. They've worked really hard, and I think one of the things we often talk about data, we present results, but what I've asked Mr. Coward to do tonight with the team is to really focus on, this is what the data, the story tells us, but this is what we're doing. I think the community needs to hear those next steps, and I've asked to get really granular so that, our community's been working very, very hard on improving student performance, and so I'm excited about the presentation that you're about to make tonight. So I just want to say thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
So as the superintendent said, we took a very different approach. So for those of you that have seen these RICAST presentations before, this one looks very different from the past. Typically what I would do is present the results and slice them and dice them in a lot of different ways to show you what our results look like from a lot of different perspectives. Cohort data, grade level data, gender, subgroups, we do a lot of that. This presentation is a little bit different. I started with some results because I think we need to put the work into context, but most of what we're going to talk about today is how we responded to our results and the things that we did this year. And so I brought a whole team of people with me because it was really important for me to make sure that the school committee and community saw that this was not work that I did really by myself at all. And that's not how we operate really as a district. And I think Mr. Murray said it earlier, it's one thing to have a really great idea. It's a whole other thing when you have people that take that idea and move it along. So different people are going to come up and speak about work that they've done. And so you could see us go from, I hope, a district level perspective down to a building level perspective. We're clearly not going to get to the student level because that would be giving, very specific confidential information about kids, but we could definitely talk about what we did at the building level. Okay, so.
I just have one comment.
Yes.
The test, the sample questions that you guys are running with your students, I had trouble with the math.
Yeah, there's one sample question in there.
I really did.
Yeah, it was put in purposefully.
I have to admit it. It's really a different way of thinking. I mean, I racked my brain on a couple of them.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through probably on my own here the first 4 or 5 slides, and then I'll have different groups of people come up and they can speak, and I'll click through. And we have a few links we're going to open up as well to kind of show you really specific pieces. So some background information about the RICAST test. This is not new information, but for everybody to be sort of on the same page, I thought I would share it. It's a lot of information, but it's an assessment of the Common Core standards. It's admitted, this was the second official time. It was really the third time, but the first time we took the test, there was no data. It was a test run. So this was the second time where it counted. It's given to students in April and May. Results are released in October. It's for students in grades 3 to 8 and ELA, which is really the reading test, and mathematics. This part I did add, which is new, is the test design, because this is actually something that we sometimes struggle with when we try to prepare kids for the test. When I was a kid and I took a standardized test, it was mostly multiple choice for the most part. There might be some other maybe essay or short answer, but it was mostly multiple choice. When our kids take the ELA test, the different kinds of questions include multiple choice, two-part questions where they actually have to do two things, tech enhanced, and I wanted to make sure I explain that. A tech enhanced question requires the kids to do something with technology to be able to demonstrate their learning. So one example would be they would have to retell a story in sequence, and they would have to click and drag and drop tiles in the right order into boxes. And for some of our kids, especially our younger kids who are taking a test for the very first time on a Chromebook, that's tricky because a Chromebook doesn't have a mouse, it's a touchpad, it's a small device with a small screen. So the text-enhanced questions can be sometimes tricky. So sometimes when we prepare kids, students for the tests, we're also trying to show them how to use all the tools because there's lots of tools available to them. There's short response, and then there's text-based essays where they have to read a passage, sometimes two passages, and then respond. Sometimes comparing and contrasting, sometimes just telling some short responses based on what they read. In math, it's a 90-minute session, multiple choice, multiple answer. That one gets tricky for kids because they have to give many answers. Also text enhanced, also short answer, and constructive response. The state administers the RICAS to 51 public school systems and independent and charter schools. So when we look at ourselves, it's not just with the public, it's everybody who took the test. And we are unless something's changed, 7th largest district. So understanding the results of the RICAS, if you look at the bands going across the middle of that page, right in the middle you see 500. That's a scale score. Anybody to the right of 500 is either meeting expectations or exceeding expectations. So when we think about kids and their proficiency, we often put those two together. They're meeting and exceeding. They're above the 500 line. And so when we look at our data and we think about kids who are successful on the tests, we look at those two together. But we often look at them individually because we like to see students that are in the median expectation range move up to exceeding. We like to see kids who are partially meeting move up to meeting. And we definitely want to see our kids who are at the bottom end of that range, not meeting expectations, move up. Right now, when we look at our data, and I don't have slides for all this, but our students who were not meeting expectations are really all sitting, many of them sitting in that yellow range, which is really good news because in the past we've had more kids in the bottom and we've been able to move them up. So now our task is to continue to move them up to the next level so that we can have more students meeting or exceeding expectation. The standards are the same in terms of what the students were being tested on when they took the PARC, but the RICAS is the MCAS test, and it's a difficult test. So sometimes students look like they're not doing as well as they have done in the past, and it's a result of the fact that it's a rigorous test. It's a tough test, and when they have to manipulate and answer questions in a few different formats, that adds to some of the difficulty. Any questions about that? So this is just really basic data. Like I said, I wanted just to put some things into context. This is our reading data, our ELA data. So the blue bars represent last year, and the green bar represents this year. So in third grade, and this is just third grade, this is not the same group of kids, it's just third grade. Last year's third grade was 64% proficient, and the year before that, the third grade was 52% proficient. So when you look across, there's growth in almost every category. The only place where we didn't see growth, which made us really stop and pause, was the fourth grade ELA. It took a drop, pretty significant drop, really. And I don't have an exact answer for that. We're kind of exploring some different things. We're also looking at cohorts of kids when we triangulate other data sources like STAR. Are they struggling in other places as well? But you can ask at least the elementary principals, because I work with them pretty closely. We talked about that result back in July and August and said we need to monitor this group really, really closely because there was definitely a dip. And when I looked at that fourth grade cohort at the state level, I didn't see the same dip. So it wasn't, you know, a statewide fourth grade didn't do as well. It really was our fourth grade didn't do as well. And so that was something that made me pause and think about a focus area. But with that said, you know, we also saw significant growth at the middle school, especially in 7th and 8th grade, where students went up 8 percentage points and 10 percentage points being proficient. Nice. So that was a nice move. Overall, the scores are moving in the right direction. They're not where we want them to be, clearly. That's why I'm making this presentation. How are we responding to this? But the reality is we're moving in the right direction. Math, similar story. We made growth in every area. 3rd grade, 39 to 43. You can see the 4th grade went up in math, 5th grade went up, 6th grade went up 11 points, which is pretty significant. 20% of our kids were proficient in 17-18 and 31 in 18-19. 7th grade went up pretty significantly as well. So when I get to the point where I start talking about the work that's done at the building levels, you know, we have representatives here from the middle school, we have representatives from the elementary, we have representatives from special education. All these people were part of the move that help us grow in these categories. Student growth. So this is important as well because RICAS measures proficiency and growth. And if you remember from last year, what they do is they put the kids in a like cohort, meaning when the students take the test and their very first time is in 3rd grade. So there's no growth score in 3rd grade. It's their very first time taking the test. But once they are taking the test, they get lumped with other kids who had similar profiles from across the state, and they measure their growth against the kids in that same profile group, that cohort. And if they have growth above 50, if you see in the middle there, 50 is sort of the dead average. If they're above 50, that means they're making either expected growth or they're making typical or high growth. So sometimes when we look at our scores from a proficiency standpoint, we'd say, well, we're not making the moves that we need to make. But then when we look at them from the point of view of growth, we'll see that groups of kids are moving in the right direction substantially, and that's important. And if it wasn't important, RIDE wouldn't include the information. They want to measure not just proficiency, but growth. So this is a little bit of a busy slide, but the orange line is mathematics and the blue line is ELA. And all I'm just trying to demonstrate here is pretty much everybody in our district is at a minimum 60% of our kids are making either typical or high growth or more. But the one that I wanted to kind of really point out is the 7th grade math is a significant jump from, if you look at that cohort of kids. And so when I backed up, if you look at the slide a few slides back, you say, well, the 7th grade did pretty well in math. You know, that there was some good proficiency. But when you look at it from the perspective of growth, the kids in the 7th grade, when compared to like cohort, made significant growth. 88% of the kids had typical or high growth. That's almost everybody. That's something to be really happy with. Those kids now will get reorganized into new cohort groups, and then we'll monitor their growth going forward. Does that make sense? So I'm gonna have some people come up. And I don't know who's gonna come up, if it's gonna be 1 or 3 or 4 or... Courtney, are you coming up by yourself or friends coming up with you? I think you're coming up by yourself. Well, you can come up as I describe what we did here. You're gonna come up? Who else? Thank you, Nick. Maybe introduce yourselves. You can talk into that one. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Courtney McRopolis, and I am the Feinstein Student Support Coordinator at the middle school.
And I'm Nikki Scheib. I'm the math curriculum coordinator at the middle school.
So what I did is I pulled a team of teachers from the middle school and from the elementary school, and we had a work session around RICAS, and we looked at released item data to create a bank of questions aligned to areas where we were not strong. So in the past, when we got our results, we would get our results and we'd say, well, we were 60% proficient, how do we do better? Now what we have is data that's aligned to specific question types, and we can look at the different questions, identify weaknesses, use those weaknesses to plan accordingly so that we can prepare our students for the next test. So the RICAS team came together and they worked with a few data sets that I'm gonna show you. And then we came up with some options on how teachers can practice with their students, not trying to get kids to teach to the test kind of thing, but we identified areas of weakness, and what we're going to do is strategies that will help kids be better prepared. So some of the strategies we talked about is students can put questions up on the board and passages on the board, and they can work through them together, and the teacher can model how they would potentially solve that problem. Teachers can work with students in small groups, especially students who need additional time or explanation and clarifying questions. Teachers can work on problems independently. Students can work on problems independently, and then teachers can solve them, and they can go over how they did. And then students can invite and share their strategies with classmates. These are all different ways that we can prepare for the test without it being drill and kill. If you know what a drill and kill is, you just give students one practice test after another. They just keep taking it, and you don't know if it's having an impact. In stealing sort of what the high school did with SATs, kids take the SAT prep, they identify areas of weakness right away through Khan Academy, and then kids can work on that. So taking that same idea, we kind of pushed it down into RICAS. So do you want to talk, or do you want me to talk? I can open up the analysis.
Yeah, we can say what we did.
Yeah.
I just don't know, are you opening up the actual question?
Well, so I could start with, so this is an ELA one, so I can start with what this just shows them.
Yeah, so here what we did is, you can see Coventry against the other towns and cities in Rhode Island. And we basically ranked the questions to see how the students did. We identified the questions or the type of questions where our students struggled the most. And then we used the released items through RIDE, and also they're the same as Massachusetts, to create some interactive PowerPoints that the teachers can use in their classroom. So we basically tried to prepare it for the teachers so it was easy to use. I hate to say quick because it's a little bit quicker in math than it is in ELA. And I think you're going to show.
I'm going to show that, but the
yeah.
other thing I wanted to point out, just so everybody can orient themselves, is you have the item number, you have the category, you have the standard, you have the question type, SR, short response, then you have the possible points. And then all the way down the column are all the different points communities earned against what was the potential maximum. And so what we did is we looked at how our points compared to the state average and then other communities, and we identified questions where we weren't where we wanted to be. So if the question is worth 2 points and we got less than half of the available points, that might be a place where we want to focus our attention. Sure. Whereas if a question is worth 1 point and our students got almost the entire point value, we know that's something we're teaching really well. Let's focus on where our kids are struggling.
And just to add to that, I'm Cynthia Ballard. I'm the ELA curriculum coordinator. By doing this and going through the process, it became very powerful for my teachers to look at those released items, to look at the points, to see where we lost points, and to really break it down with those released items that they're going to be using in their test practice. So really, in addition to working with students, it presented an opportunity for me, probably Nikki, to work with teachers and for them to have those aha moments. Oh, okay. So it was really powerful for me too as the curriculum coordinator.
So this is an example of something Nikki worked on.
So for math, there were several concerns or things that it could be. Curriculum, obviously the test happens before the end of the school year, so not everything has been taught yet. So you have to teach the students kind of how to struggle through things that maybe they haven't seen yet. So some of it could be scope and sequence where it is. Others could be it was taught maybe in September and they don't remember. So we've already started this process. All the teachers in the middle school have started reviewing these things. So it's not just cramming in before the test. So I think 2 or 3 times a week they're doing it. Some may be doing more. There's plenty of questions. They certainly could do it every day. I made sure there was plenty. And we started with the most important, or the ones that we struggled with the most. So that's the ones that the teachers are starting with. And then we'll get to the ones that they did a little bit better on. So you can see this is a 1-point question. I think it's important for the kids to know how the points are determined, because some, like this is simply a multiple choice. They get it right, they get it wrong. There's some that are multiple selects, which they have to select 2, 3, maybe 4 correct answers. If they miss one of them, they don't get the point. And fair or not, that is how it goes. So it's nice to show the kids kind of what the 4-point questions look like, what the 1-point questions look like, just to, attend to precision, one of those math practices. And then we also kind of showed them last year's students, what percent got them incorrect. So we kind of play a game with it. And in my classroom, I do teach 7th grade. So is this a 7th grade one?
I think it's 8th grade.
Okay, so I would say, okay, this is a 4-point question. This is a question that actual students in our school last year had. This is the percent that got it incorrect. Let's see if we can beat that. So it's kind of a little contest too, which helps motivate them.
So these are all in the format of a presentation. And so the expectation was for every teacher of ELA and math in grades 3 to 8 to, at a minimum, 3 times a week, spend 10 to 15 minutes on one of these questions. And I'll give you an example, because Cynthia had ELA, and ELA doesn't look the same as math. So when you look at ELA, sometimes you have a practice item which is a complicated item. So this is for 6th grade. It's item number 3. It's 1 point. There's a standard. She actually put in what it is, what the standard is. And then if you notice here, that says MCAS, because we're pulling not just from released items from RICAS, but Massachusetts has a whole bank of released items as well. It's the same test. So we're very strategic on how we do this. We're not just giving last year's results and see, how that looks. We're trying to tap into as many resources as we can, because if there was an area of weakness, we might want to practice that over and over and over again. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that just so you can see what it looks like.
And we're pulling from the 2018 released items as well. Just there's
Right.
we have more.
And MCAS had a very deep bank, so I chose that. So one thing I've noticed with my 7th graders, I don't know if it pertains to this particular question, but this one is about text features. There's what we're finding with just doing review in my classroom, that nowhere on the RICAS do the questions say, hey, kids, we're asking you about text features. So that what we're finding is students might actually know the material and the information, they just don't know what they're being asked. And I know that might sound kind of flip, but I think it's really very true. So for instance, so this is a 6th grade one, what is the most likely reason the author included headings in shipwrecked? So we know that headings are integral to text structure. But if students had posed that in a way that maybe perhaps we as teachers sort of spoon feed it to them, then they're able to tell us. But left to their own devices, they need to become test savvy enough, number 1, to identify that. But 2, I think we have to have them grapple more with complex text like that so they recognize it just immediately, almost innately. And so I think that's where, those of us who are learners, things were difficult for us initially, and now we don't think about certain things, riding a bicycle, driving a car, right? Until we get pulled over. So that's just one example and something that we know.
So when the superintendent said go down to the granular level, I need the people who do that work to go to the granular level. It's very difficult for me to do it from my position. So when we pulled together this work group, it was all different teachers who teach at those levels, who have access to all of the resources. And what we did is pull together a whole bank of resource links, so they didn't have to hunt and look for them. That's something we could do at my office, is say, here are all the links to RICAS, to MCAS, to released items, to item analysis at your fingertips. All you have to do is analyze your data and find examples that align with where we're struggling. And then give the kids an opportunity to learn from the perspective of somebody who could, like Nikki said, look at where the kids were last year, look how they did, and push yourselves to see if you can figure out those concepts. Okay. So I'm going to back up a second here. So what's that? So this was a one-day thing, and I have to commend the teachers because they did not stop. I said to them, we're all adults, so I'm like, take your breaks when you need them, take your lunch when you need it, do what you need to do. I'm not gonna sit here and hover over you. If you need help, I'll help you. They set off and they started working, and they literally did not stop. They didn't get up and leave for lunch. They just worked right through the end. And it was so quiet. I would go in there, just ask one question. It felt like I was, disrupting church. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get out of here, because they were just so zoned in and focused on what they were doing. Anything else you want to add to the process that you went through?
Are we going to go to the other side?
Yep.
Okay.
If you're ready.
No, we don't want to step on your toes.
No, they don't want to. Ozzy doesn't want to. Can you go past that?
Sorry.
Okay, so that was step number one, is figuring out how we needed to approach this with our students. Step number two is, again, how we're going to approach it with our students, but also our staff. So this is what our leadership team has come up with, to just something to maybe hang around the building, take a deep breath, go with the flow, just do your best and show what you know. And we've actually decided, I think we're going to make this our slogan moving forward, just hang it around the building and leave it there. So that's first. That'll be something that teachers will let the students know of. So there's a long list of ways that we're preparing for the upcoming test. We already had a faculty meeting where we shared the data with the staff and showed them how well we did in certain areas. We really wanted them to feel good about our scores from last year, so that this year they would be more invested in the process, because sometimes teaching to a test is not why teachers, that doesn't motivate them all the time. So we wanted to try to motivate them. We created the grade level activities, of course. The CPT time, so we have common plan time within our schedule. And this is something that we're starting after we come back from vacation. So we've been sitting and planning how we're going to share teachers, students from last year and students from this year, how they scored on the RICAS test, and give them exact results so that they can compare their last year's scores, how they did with those students, where they struggled. And we're going to work them through an entire protocol. And then we're going to share with them their current students, who of course they didn't have last year, but again, identify where are their needs and where can we maybe put up more of our efforts from now until April or May when they take their test. We also have, we also have come up with some motivational days within our schedule. So we're trying to motivate kids to come to school during testing days. We're trying to show them that they have to put their best foot forward. So we've created checklists that we're going to have on every student. Did you come on time? Did you come prepared? Did you use your scrap paper? Anything that we can get them to do.
Charge a Chromebook.
Yeah, did you charge a Chromebook? And then if the students, check off all of these things, then they're going to be rewarded with some type of celebration after the testing. And we're really trying to push that this year. And we have more than one celebration. So we're trying to do a pep rally beforehand where the band's going to play in the hallways, and we might get the cheerleaders to come in, and it might sound cheesy, but just something to kind of show that this is really important to what we do. We're going to try to provide breakfast for all the students, because we're not really sure that all the students are eating before the test, and that can be a big thing.
That was one of the biggest gaps we did notice, that students with low socioeconomics had really did not perform as well as their counterparts. So that might be an equalizer, at least for the food in the morning. So that was one of the data things that
But the big change to that is, in order to do that, feed everybody, you're looking at probably about $7,000 to do that. And that's like 100 grams and a juice box, or whether it's orange juice or apple juice. So, but if you look at other towns that have things like this, you will see that they do this stuff for testing. So is it something that we want to invest in to see about, are we getting the best bang for the buck for it? That's something that we believe it would help.
And often the PTOs and PTAs will support that activity.
Yeah.
Mr. Feinstein actually gave us a grant,
Yeah.
$2,000 for celebration of the successes as well.
Do you also have this?
I think so.
I
I think that's it for us,
Are there any questions?
without being too big.
Good job.
So the next group is our elementary group, and so the elementary did the same kind of thing at the work session. One thing I did want to show you before they speak, and I picked this question on purpose. So if you look at this slide right here, and you look at the slide before it, you'll see that these are like an item analysis. So after the first year the students did RICAS, we didn't get anything like this. After the second year they did RICAS, we didn't get anything like this. After the third year RICAS, which was last year, we got this from the Department of Ed. It's very helpful to plan around students and performance and where our potential difficulties are in standards alignment when you have an item analysis. So I've been through like 4 or 5 different standardized tests, and it always follows sort of the same pattern. The test comes in, they give you nothing, then they give you a little bit more, and then they realize how to organize the data the way people want it and need it. And then when you start getting that, you can be successful because you know how to strategize and be successful. But what I wanted to point out is at the elementary level, they ended up making their own item analysis over the summer because they couldn't wait for Department of Ed to release it in October. So many of the elementary teachers, they built an Excel spreadsheet with formulas in it, and they were able to start analysis early on. What I wanted to point out is this question right here, that's in red. 32% of our kids got that question correct. And that question is this question. And if you look at the question, which of these quadrilaterals is not a rectangle? And can anybody guess what most of our kids put as the answer? B. And the reason they put B, because they said it's not a rectangle. But guess what? It's not a quadrilateral either. And so our kids got tripped up on one simple part of that question. And that's not a long question. They were looking for a quadrilateral. Our kids saw that B was not a rectangle. And they quickly checked B. So some of what our teachers are doing to prepare kids for this kind of test is close reading. You ready?
Yep. All right, so I'm starting us off on the first slide. If Don wants to click, this is another chart that we are using at the elementary level to break down our data even further. So click on that chart so it gets bigger. Thanks, Don. So along with the individual item analysis at the elementary schools, we're also using this chart to identify, we're putting math and reading together and organizing it by subgroups in ELA and in math. So that kind of what I blacked out are all the students' names. We put in the home room so we can really look at data by classroom teacher, and then how students performed in each of those specific areas. In the purple row are the total number of points that students can get, and if you scroll all the way down, Don, the blue is whether they were meeting, not meeting, partially meeting. We average out all of those scores, and we average them out by homeroom as well, so we really can pinpoint the areas of weakness within each one of our elementary schools. So then in turn, we can look at what our school improvement teams look like, what our focus is going to be in data meetings, in faculty meetings, within classrooms, within grade levels, within the school. So this kind of goes hand in hand with that item analysis data sheet that we use in the elementary schools. All right, so based on that, like I said, we're using the chart that looks like that to identify our strengths and weaknesses, and then really look at our school improvement team and having specific areas of need. For example, we're looking on problem solving for math was a real area of weakness. Writing across all elementary schools was an area of weakness. So we're having really focused conversations, data meetings, and school improvement team meetings around those areas. What does that look like, and what are our next steps to make improvements? Our data meetings are really focused on those specific areas, so we can pull up those grade levels, we can pull up the classrooms, so we can see each teacher can really review their data with principals. Often we're doing that at most of our data meetings so that we can really pinpoint what do our incoming students need and what did we need as a grade level for those students that are now moving on. And then finally, looking at our content area team. So we're meeting as an ELA team, as a math team, to look at that whole school data piece. And then Amy's going to talk about some of our next steps from that we did at the elementary level.
And this is work done across elementary. It's not just at these two schools.
Yep, exactly.
We're just the lucky ones to be here. So
a lot of the conversation that we've had right now is about work specifically around what the data says and looking at released items. This actually goes to the next step about changing the instruction that happens in the classroom to meet some of those needs. And the ones that I'm going to really talk about are the writing and the math. So on the first 2 years, the one where we didn't get scores, and then the first year we got scores of RICAS, we saw in our writing some kinds of tasks that, although they mentioned them within the, that kids needed to use multiple sources when they were responding to a question, we didn't have very many opportunities for kids to do that in the classroom because some of our curriculum material didn't have multiple sources for kids to read and then respond to. So the first year we spent really trying to find opportunities for kids to have a prompt with multiple sources that they could pull information from. Then the next year after that, we now are starting to look at what does the students' writing look like when they're using those multiple sources and having to respond to certain prompts. When we looked at our data about it, our kids didn't score great in writing even on the second year after using multiple sources. So we dug a little bit deeper, and the actual, some of the released items actually gave us what our students wrote about. We actually got them back so we could see what did they actually put on the test, and then what was the score. So we blacked out some of our students' writing, and we looked at the rubrics that the state or RICAS was using to score. They divided it into two different categories, idea development and also in language and conventions. We really focused on the idea development part of it, and we had our teachers score some of those writing pieces at the different buildings, and they were our own kids' pieces. And then we said, okay, so this is what RICAS gave as a score, this is what you did. And so does it tell us anything about our expectations versus what the standards expectations are? We also, RICAS released some proficient work and showed us exactly what it should look like. And we examined lots of student proficient work so that we could see strengths in our students' writing and weaknesses in ours based on that proficient work. Once we felt comfortable about what the expectations were at each of the grade levels, and we actually didn't just do this in grades 3, 4, and 5. We spent time in other grade levels, kinder, first, and second, because they're part of that process. 3, 4, and 5 aren't the only ones that own these scores. We all do, and the instruction. So all of the grade levels participated in that. And then we figured out what were some of the cohort needs based on looking at the writing they were doing across the year, not just what we saw on RICAS, especially because we didn't have kinder, first, or second grade RICAS scores. So we had to look at what they were doing every day. We planned for implementation. Okay, so what's this going to look like? What do our kids need? So for example, our kids had a really hard time when they were citing the source. They actually were just pulling stuff right out and writing it and quoting it instead of actually thinking about how that information from the source enhanced their piece that they were writing about. So there were things that we needed to do better and plan for how we're going to implement that in the classroom, and then repeat the cycle again. Go back, look at our grade level work, and then refine from there. In math, we identified some common areas after looking at the data of places that our kids were falling apart. And one was in multi-step problem solving. And in different schools, we've done different things, but basically it's with the same end result. How are we going to meet the needs of our kids and also have better instruction in the classroom around, for example, multi-step problem? So we started to think about outside the box of how we could reorganize. One of the ways that I know that we've done it is taking an entire cohort, an entire grade, and using all the resources and people that we have. So, for example, I'm a piece of it. So instead of 3 teachers at the grade level, we use a specialist and then myself, and we reorganize the entire grade into 5 groups instead of 3 groups. So we have smaller learning communities and lots of strategic teaching that we're going to do to meet the needs of the multi-step problem solvers. And then again, assess and see how well our kids are doing now that we've provided some of that instruction, and then reshuffling of the plans so that we're continually focusing on those specific areas, and right now mainly in writing and math, which we identified as being weak areas.
Thank you.
Okay?
So I hope what you're hearing is a very academic conversation, and we're getting better and better and better at looking at data, analyzing data, and now making decisions to respond to that data to help prepare our kids, not just for one test on one day, but prepare them for alignment to the standards and to the curriculum. And then the next piece that goes with that is, like Amy said, the instructional piece. And we have ELA curriculum work happening in the district right now. And some of the materials that we're looking at, Christine and I were sitting at a table together, and a lot of the things that our kids struggle with are embedded in the curriculum materials that we're looking at, which are of a much higher quality than what we're currently using. So right now, when Amy was talking about having to find 2 pieces of text for kids to read and then compare and do work around that, they're trying to find that, where in some of the new materials we're looking at, it's provided, and the students can do that kind of work right in the materials that we're buying. So I'm kind of jumping around here. I apologize. So I work closely with Dr. Fred Shockhart, and he is my next door neighbor. And anytime I present something like this, I always want to have the special education component be part of that conversation. So you can have the floor.
Thank you. And I only have one slide. So for special... and I'll be quick. So there's actually some good news for our students with disabilities. First of all, we saw the number of students, or the percentage of students who met proficiency in 2019 versus 2018. We saw them almost double. In ELA from 4 to 8%. From math, almost 4% to almost 6%. Maybe as a point of reference, Massachusetts also pulled their numbers. They are almost 20 years ahead of us because they're in year 21 of the MCAS administration. We're in year 2 of the RICAS. For ELA, IEP students, they're at 16%. For math, they're at 15%. Yeah, so we're not that far off. What was also interesting is when I pulled the numbers for Massachusetts, they actually qualify more students with IEPs. So that's they qualify about 3% of students more than we do in Rhode Island. So you could almost argue that if we were qualifying the same amount of students, we probably would see another bump. And the other statement I want to make about proficiency and closing achievement gaps is you probably remember Mr. Coward at the start of his presentation pointing out the 4 performance standards and how we want to move students up to the next level. So close to half of our IEP students fall in the partially meeting standards, which is the level just below meeting the standards. So our trend, our patterns point in a very positive direction. We've also taken a couple of initiatives since we received the data. One was Mr. Coward and I applied for a grant from RIE to offer, that was last summer, a summer reading institute, because usually we provide summer services for those students who are the furthest behind academically. This initiative focused on the students who are actually closest to meeting the standards, and so we'll investigate or explore the data to see if that little push over the summer had an effect on RICAS performance, because those were the IEP students who barely missed the cutoff for meeting the standards. We've also started a dyslexia initiative, and I've also been working together with the Superintendent's Association and representatives from Bryant University and Brown University to really dig deep into and compare MCAS scores with RICAS scores, because it's not clear to me, or I should say I hope, that both the Department of Education and the Governor's Office also look at the Massachusetts data. I'm not sure to what extent that has happened. So what we've been doing with our research group is we've looked at a whole number of variables and calculated what their the correlation is of each one of those, let's say it's enrollment, spending, poverty levels on RICAS proficiency, to try to figure out now within a community, what are some of the predictive factors for RICAS and MCAS proficiency. So it's been a very interesting project. You'll probably hear more of that. And it's been really interesting and very revealing. And the only thing I'm going to say about it is when you hear people make statements like, well, Rhode Island is far behind Massachusetts, when you actually run the numbers, you get a very different picture. We actually are doing pretty well. When you take into account the variables, community variables that seem to impact RICAS performance. And we also should keep in mind that there is a 2-decade experience difference. We're in year 2, they're in year 21. I mean, I always say, if let's say I'm a painter, after 20 years, my walls are going to look a whole lot better than the second year, because with experience comes mastery. Happy to answer any questions you may have. And if not, we can move on.
I like that one. Wow. So this is a quick summary. I'm not going to read all of it. The bottom line is that the results that we get are still pretty much in line with district level data. So we know where our kids are, and this was more about how we're going to respond to better prepare the students. Some of this information I've already shared, so I'm not going to read it all again. But the last thing that I put up there was just that the test is not our only measurement of success. It's one part of our students' lives. You know, you looked at all those wrestlers up there, and some of those wrestlers, their success was built around that. And so when we think about our kids and our students, we want them to do well in the test. It's a measurement for our community, but at the same time, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that our kids are their whole life, their whole experience is not based on just preparing for the RICAS, taking the RICAS, and then hopefully, you know, getting over 500 on their scale score. You know, there's a lot more to that than just the test. But I do want you to know that we took a strategic approach this year. The superintendent asked for me to go very, very granular, get down to the nitty-gritty, and so hopefully that's what you saw. Any questions, comments? I got an incentive from my friends behind me. They said I was on a roll and that I'm almost done. So and it's full of Tootsie Rolls. So if there's no more questions, I will say thank you to all of them. They didn't all have to come to a school committee meeting. They didn't all have to do this, and they all said yes when I asked them. So I appreciate all of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I found it very, very fascinating, and I enjoyed reading the packet. And from hearing from all of you, I just think it's great work. I'm so glad to see the granular, quite honestly, and to see the progress you're making. I think we will see progress, and I think that's the whole goal. And so that's really, really exciting. If I were doing this work, I'd be excited. Anyway, Mr. Florio, did you have any questions or comments?
Great job. Teachers, fantastic as always. Fred, thank you for the short presentation. And principals, you're amazing for what you've done with the teachers and what's happening and the teamwork that's been done. I just would like to see it continue. And Don, you're going to make sure it continues.
Oh, yeah.
I know. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Murray, any questions, concerns, comments?
No, thank you for everyone who did volunteer to step up tonight to make the presentation. I know it is granular. I'd be lying if I got every single component, but I get the basic framework. And I think the larger thing that helps me convey to the community when I'm out there and parents talk about this, and when the results come out and they seem like it's all doom and gloom, is that it seems like there's a lot more opportunity with the current RICAS to get down to this granular level and actually, through an evaluation of the data, actually start turning these scores around. As opposed to some previous standardized testing, it looks like this is a stable environment where we can build a curriculum around and invest in this and not feel like, okay, so the ball's going to change in another 3 to 5 years, right? Because with Massachusetts model, now we have some surety that that model is going to stay in place. You're building a system around that, which is important. And I think you're, by getting down to this granular level, people, the argument is always, you don't want to teach to the test. Well, how else do you teach? If you don't teach a kid how to actually take that test and the data, then of course you're setting them up for failure. So I'm enthused that we're starting to redevelop the curriculum and start teaching a little bit to the test. We know that we want the outcome to be more than that. You've said that. But I think, we elevate everybody in the community if the kids, obviously are able to achieve. We're setting them up for success, and I think that's what we want. So,
Right, in a very systematic way, I hope.
yes. So that's it. Thank you very much, and keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Donna?
Thanks for the presentation. I really, I think this is interesting. I like watching that, looking at the different components. And I like the fact that we saw an increase in proficiency. We're in the right direction. We are, we're getting there, and that only goes to show that it's your team that works together and, gets down to the nitty-gritty. So, thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Pierce?
I'm going to do one of my things. When I was first elected, we used to get these no, seriously though, we used to get these presentations, and it was largely just a presentation of scores. Here's the scores, and glossed over all the work that's done behind the scenes. And I really think it did a disservice to the community, the relationship between the committee and the staff, and it did a disservice to the public because they had no idea what was going on in the background. All they got from these presentations was, here are the scores. So thank you. This is awesome. And I'm just talking about the presentation so far, that, we see this. Not only are we seeing the scores, you're communicating the growth, you're communicating the action items that come out of this, and you're really giving us a sense of all the work that everyone is putting into, trying to make sure our students are successful. And it's really good to hear. It's really encouraging. These are the kind of meetings that I know we're on YouTube, but we really should be highlighting this and say, everyone, look at the work the school is doing. So thank you for that. My second point was, we could keep talking about Massachusetts, and you're right, they've got 2-decade head start on us. They've also got flat growth right now. So what's encouraging is we should see growth for the foreseeable future until we reach the point like they are, where they're struggling with why do we have flat growth? We could only wish to have that problem, right? We want to grow until we get up there. So it's something I think the community should understand, that while Massachusetts is the gold standard, they're struggling a little bit right now with their situation. And we're improving. So
right, and it's
we're catching
steady year after year growth. That's what we're looking for, 3 to 5% every single year. We'll get where we need to be. We don't want an EKG where we're up and down every other year. We want to be on a steady incline.
Terrific. So thank you again, everyone involved, for your hard work. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay. Anything from the citizens gathered? Again, I want to thank you all again for your very hard work, and I couldn't be happier to see a presentation like this. It was very interesting when I read through it, even, and as well as the presentation. So great. Good job. Okay, moving on to number 12, which is the capital budget discussion and vote. It was our reference number 7. Mr. Levis, did you want to start?
Sure, I'm going to ask Mr. Martin to come up to the podium. We are not asking for, in our budget, we are not asking for capital. We need to focus on our operational budget, but we still want to submit. I spoke with Mr. Crossman today. They're going to be reviewing these at the Planning Commission, and this doesn't preclude the town from deciding that they may want to fund projects. But these are projects that you've seen before. They include some of the NEASC needs. They include I mean, well, I think they're self-explanatory in terms of gym floor and HVAC systems. I think I just need to remind everybody that we are in the process of spending the money that the town gave us last year to improve the HVAC system at the high school, which is one of the issues in terms of NEASC and obviously at the high school. But we're going to be hopefully soon in the process of stage 2. And so a lot of these issues will have to be addressed, if not sooner, through that process, hopefully through that process also. So again, we are not asking the town for funds, but we want to make sure that we still submit a capital list. And like I said, a lot of these are reoccurring. There still needs, are going to be needs. And so if you have questions about the list, Mr. Martin's here. If you have any questions about the financing aspect of it, Ms. Mangiarelli is here, so.
I think most of those items I've seen this before. Yeah. Unfortunately, that is true.
Were there any questions from the committee? Mr. Florio, did you have any?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Murray.
Jason, obviously these are all carried forward costs, because what we show here is obviously it wasn't funded through past budgets. These are things that have just continually bumped, is what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So.
Just bump over, but sometimes I have to adjust.
Because you know.
Changes in cost or something. So sometimes you'll see some of the prices change. For example, the school we had those quoted out, and those are dead on prices. Those are real prices, broken down by elementary to high school. Middle school, high school, where we did. So.
But you see a lot of round numbers. Obviously, these numbers are going to continue to change every year we delay.
Correct.
Right, they're going to inflate. And it's going to cost prospectively the town more money because obviously everything goes up. I'll just state my obvious comment, which I get extremely frustrated that we're not going for the capital and prioritizing capital, because again, it's going to cost us more money later. We kick the can down the road until the inevitable happens, which we end up with failures. I know it's not necessarily our fault. I know that we're trying to do the best thing, which is fund our operating, but it just is extremely frustrating to be in a position where I have to vote on something that basically I don't agree with, but I know that not agreeing with it just basically means that I can steal money. I can try to persuade people to put money in the capital, but I'm basically stealing from our operational budget, which means further layoffs or other implications for our children. So. I'll just put that out there for the community. That's all.
Donna?
I've seen this list before.
We've seen it many times every year.
And I agree with Luke. It's like, we can't just keep kicking the can down the road, but we also, only have so much money. So, but I did want to ask one question though. The gym floor replacement. You've got 1 year, 231,000. The next year's 147. Is that like a refinishing or?
No. So it's two different buildings.
Okay.
It's the high school and the middle school.
High school first, then the middle school. Okay. Thanks. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Pearson?
Yeah, good segue into my question. It's a minor point, but I would have liked to have seen the gym floor replacement projects separated out, and the same with the sewer connection projects, because they're and actually the floor tile replacement. When you start dealing with different buildings, they're vastly different projects that are probably not going to happen at the same time. I would assume maybe the floor tiles you could, but I complain every year, and I'm going to do it again. Sewer connection, CHS. Town doesn't own that sewer line, so I don't know why that's on here. Until they resolve that issue, that's a very challenging situation. This, I'm going to assume, because of the asterisks on here, this is not a prioritized list. It looks like 3 of these items we may be paying for this year out of something. It says we anticipate completing these items in FY FY19.
So the security upgrade, fire alarm upgrade.
That was last year.
And school intercom system.
Yeah.
Security upgrades have been done.
Yep.
However, it's an ongoing, growing thing where new technology comes out or new development, or, for example, the strobe lights that we put in. Some of the schools would still like to see some of those out in the front of the building, not just by recess. So just because some of the project was done, not all of it. I mean, there's always school safety things that could be done. Fire alarm upgrades pretty much have to happen on a yearly basis as far as devices. They age out. Most of our panels have been updated, but again, it's kind of like replacing the boilers and not doing the pumps and everything. There's
So
more to it.
point is, we're paying for these items not through a capital fund, but through other means.
I think that, but that's also in reference to, if you remember, we had approval from RIDE for emergency funds up to a certain amount. And so the asterisk just, like, if we had the money in terms of, we have that approval where we can get reimbursement from RIDE, I think it was up to, was it $447,000? But the reality is that we don't have that money. That was it? I think it was 2 years ago that we got the approval. So I think that's part of just the acknowledgement. Like, we had an opportunity to purchase, and if we had funds, we were talking about using some of our impact fees at the time, but we haven't had the ability to do that. And again, the point of Mr. Murray is that, I think, I just don't want to lose sight that maybe it was token, but last year we received $200,000 in capital. It was the first time in 12 years that we received anything from capital. So I know that diverted. I apologize, Mr. Pearson, from your question.
No, good point. I guess, can we, before we,
Sure.
Can we amend this, because that
Sure.
that asterisk actually refers to fiscal year 2019. I don't think that's
Yeah,
relevant.
we can eliminate the asterisk for that.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Luke's got a good point. This is kind of just ceremonial because we don't have a capital budget, so we're just voting on this because we have to.
Right.
I wish we had capital funds and projects in play, but we don't. So it's unfortunate.
And I do just want to mention, as far as the floor tiles, I keep that together because sometimes we save, there's a lot of abatement that would have to happen. If we are doing multiple jobs, we sometimes get a savings for having them do the abatement at Hoffman Hill and then go over and do some at Coventry High School. So it's good to keep it as two schools, but it is really one project.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Anything else from the committee? Are we ready to move?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the revised district, I'm sorry about that. Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the capital budget as presented / amended.
I second the motion.
Any further questions or comments on the committee? Anything from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Martin, for that list that we've seen many times before. Hopefully, before I get off committee, something will get done. Something. It's very sad in a lot of ways. Moving on to 13. It's a second reading of a policy. Mr. Levis, did you want to take this?
Sure.
Mr. Pearson?
This is the second reading. There was at the last
Yep.
meeting, you had brought up a point about it in terms of, let me pull the policy up.
I think it was first aid at any event or something had to be reported. and so-
Correct. And we determined that this policy is specifically for the
Just for
use of an AED. And so we just removed that, and I believe that was the only comment that was made. So if there's not any questions, I would recommend that the committee approve.
Okay, so is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to dispense with the reading of the public access defibrillation, PAD policy, JLCEA, as presented / amended.
Second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Anything from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. And now we're ready to approve the policy.
Madam Chair, I recommend the approval for the public access defibrillation policy, JLCA as presented / amended.
Second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. And then the 14 agenda item, which is reference number 9, which is the revision, discussion, and vote of the distribution of materials policy. Mr. Levis, did you want to comment?
I'll start in it. If Mr. Pearson wants to add to this, please do. This was originally, the second reading was in November 7th. There was some concern brought up that we had aligned this policy to really look at if we're going to distribute materials for non-school organizations, we wanted to make sure that materials that were being distributed were not representative of any products or activities that were illegal for students. There was some concern about raffles, and so this has come back and forth with us. We've worked with our attorney, both Mr. Anderson and Mr. Clough, and I think we had a really good conversation at a couple of our policy subcommittees. And even though there's some risk, we felt that if we were to remove the word, it used to say not legal for students to participate in may not promote any activity or product. And we decided if we took out the word activity and focused on product. So what we did is we made that sentence its own paragraph, and then we added some specifics. And you'll see it's like alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and prescription, non-prescription drugs. So there's still some, obviously, potential for maybe something to get through, but we felt that removing activities should address the concerns that a lot of our booster clubs and PTO, PTAs had. And yet it still allows us to control to some degree the type of materials that we will be distributing. So I don't know if Mr. Pearson can explain it better than me. But
I think you summed it up well. Thank you.
Cool. We ready to move on this?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to dispense with the reading of the revised distribution material policies, KDC, as presented / amended.
Second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Is there a motion to approve the revised policy?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the revised distribution of materials policy, parentheses KDC, as presented / amended.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Again, I just want to thank the members of that policy subcommittee and superintendent and any other people that have been part of the discussions on changing and bringing forth these policies. Their work is very much appreciated. So finally, almost finally, superintendent's report, which I hope will be somewhat brief.
No, it'll be brief. I just want to give an update on, first on the rezoning of the annex. You know, we've had an issue getting propane tank for our buses. This work and this conversation started as soon as the bus company signed the contract with them. There's the bottom line is that, we've been given dates, and again, I appreciate the relationship we have with the town and working closely with the council and the town manager and all the different departments. But the fact is, I just need to remind everybody, we did not place the buses there. We did not pay for a fence to be put up there. And the bottom line now is that I spoke with Mr. Crossman last week. An attorney for the propane company had contacted me because concerned about why this is taking so long. I put him in touch, or gave him the information to contact Mr. Wazika. I did get an updated timeline from Mr. Crossman, and I have to say, Mr. Wazika and Mr. Crossman have been excellent to work with in this process. So it looks like now that Monday night there's going to be a public hearing with the council. They have had it posted, I guess, 3 weeks in a row about the changes in zoning. But from that point, it gets, I believe, kicked back to the planning board, which brings it to has a public hearing, and then it goes to the zoning board, which I believe has a public hearing. And the bottom line is, and I will share with you the timelines. I have them, they're in my car, unfortunately, so I will send them to you, and you'll see it as laid out by Mr. Crossman. But what I do know, it looks like right now that they'll be able to get a permit if everything is done properly in May, which doesn't really help us, because if we've been fortunate with the weather, but if there's a major snowstorm, I don't know how they're going to continue. Right now, they're wet fueling, they're bringing a truck in, they have to have drivers. And there's a fee for that. And, my plan is if we receive the bill or get a bill is, and I know we need to work closer with town, but I will need to pass that on, because this, I still don't understand why this has taken so long. And then, so if everything goes according to the plan, that it will be May 1st when they can get the permit to put in propane. So, and we started this, like I said, the bus contract, it was in the summertime or towards the end of last year when we started this conversation. So I'm not going to tell you that I understand why it's taken so long. I understand why the propane and the bus company has been very patient, but why they're upset. And there is a propane tank there already that was permitted. I must have been prior to, many years ago. But for the police station, for the generator there. So, and again, I'm not here to point finger. I just want to lay out, these are the facts, and it's extremely frustrating and challenging, but I appreciate the support. Like I said, Mr. Crossman and Mr. Wozika have been very supportive of this process, but it's just taking way too long. So, and I will share that. I apologize. I didn't bring them in. I printed them up today, and I will email them to the committee.
Hey, Craig,
Yes.
Can I ask one question? The propane tank that was there, is it still there for the police?
Yes.
And when that tank went in, were there any, are you aware of any, was that a zoning relief, or when they put that before zoning?
That I have no idea, because it's zoned residential. So
The only reason I ask you
but
is it might
buses
an
shouldn't be in a
existing one.
residential so there's a lot of a comedy of errors here. And again, I don't
Yeah.
want to point the finger. We just want this resolved.
No, I don't want to pile it on town, but as you know, I'm a planner. I know the process. I can't believe it's taking this long. I'm not even sure why it would have to go back to planning. It should be a
Well, maybe it's
two-step,
again. Maybe
like
it
a
goes right
master
to
plan.
zoning. So
Yeah.
I don't. Maybe I misspoke.
no, it's okay.
But I know it has to
just-
go to zoning, and then it has to go to a hearing at the zoning board. That I do know. But
I'm just kind of questioning the timeline myself, because I know the process.
yeah,
And, it usually
and I'll
doesn't
share
take
as
this
soon
long,
as
so.
I will forward that to you. As soon as we're done with the meeting, I can forward it. So.
And the only reason I asked about the tank, there might have been an opportunity to use that existing nonconformance to place that tank, use that prior nonconformity.
Yeah.
So whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Well, I know Mr. Pearson talked a little bit before, but I think it's, Jason and I have talked a lot about the sewers, and I'm not going to pretend to understand all the dynamics about the high school. I just know that to have such a large septic system, when there is sewer. So again, I don't want to pretend to understand, to know the details. I just wanted to have, not a conversation tonight, but I wanted to bring it forward. And the same thing with the Tioga. I don't want to wait till, at least with Tioga, till we're told we can't utilize the septic system. We have to do emergency. I'd like to have this is really on there, just to say I want to bring it back and have hopefully at least enlightening me conversation publicly with the committee and with Mr. Martin, whatever. I'd like to talk about that. And the last one was just, I think, very positive in terms of, hopefully, the necessity for school construction process. That appreciate the council supported the application. There's a resolution I want to pass out signed by the council. Mr. Murray and I. So the application has been delivered to RIDE, or is being delivered tomorrow with all the signatures. And Mr. Murray and I will be meeting with Mr. Conti. I'll have Mrs. McDonald coordinate that. And just to kind of look at where we're at in next steps and come up with a plan of what that cost would be. Because we need to figure out what it's going to cost to actually, not a ballpark, but we need some real specifics around what a stage 2 will be. So, but I think that's, the first hurdle was getting the stage 1 application. So I appreciate the support of everybody. So many people had a part in that. So, and I do want to thank the council, the building committee and the committee, but the council for putting that forward the other night. So that's it.
Anything further from the committee for Mr. Levis? Anything from the public? Seeing none, citizens' comments from anyone? I think we're all probably too exhausted to even think about a citizen's comment. Seeing none, is there a motion to schedule the next meeting?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the next meeting of the school committee be scheduled for Thursday, February 27th, 2020, at 7 p.m. at Coventry Town Hall.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries 5-0. Is there a motion to adjourn? I have 9:52.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to adjourn at 9:52 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries 5-0.
I thought it was going to be longer than that.